So you mentioned one of the trainings already that you recommend for sexual harassment. What are other trainings that you recommend to business owners? And I know it's a general question, but
Yeah.
I know people, most people are, I would think, are aware of sexual harassment. What other kind of trainings are available?
There's still some people who don't. So let me start there. The
Right.
mandatory sexual harassment prevention training, that's if you have five or more people working for you, you are required by law to provide that training for supervisors and non-supervisors. So it should be 2 hours of training, interactive, let me be specific, interactive
Yes.
training
Yes.
for supervisors and 1 hour for non-supervisors, and you have to take it thereafter every 2 years. So sexual harassment prevention training is not new, right? It's been around for years, but in these past few years, going back to like 2019, and then it became effective 2020, a lot of additional things have been added, like gender identity, gender expression, abusive conduct. So it's really been updated. So some people are like, oh yeah, I took that training back in the 90s. Well, it has changed a lot. So though that's a training, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training. Those are some trainings that we have been doing for some of our clients too. That is super impactful. And just it's just really allowing the team and recognize you as a company, you're positioning yourself to say, we are a diverse, equitable, and we include and make sure that our employees belong. So we think that training is really good. Another training that a lot of people bypass is new hire orientation training. I think that's like one of the most important trainings because you want the client and the company, you want to set the precedence and you want to set the tone for your employees. Now, training on the job, that's something different. But as soon as the employee come in, you want to say, this is who we are. This is our mission. This is our values. This is what we stand for. And when you have that type of training, your employees are a little bit more, they buy in a little bit more. And they're like, oh, this is something I can get behind. When you don't have those trainings, then that's when the employees feel like, oh, I just went to work. But when you include them, that is really impactful by you letting them know. Even for the employers. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it triggered for me because I am constantly amazed as to how often people just sometimes just hire and do not bother to orient to employees because, well, I looked at the resume, they went through 3 interviews, and then next thing you know, day one starts and this person doesn't know who they're reporting to, doesn't know what the policies are, doesn't know, they know their job. So let's assume I bring someone in as an associate, right? I mean, they know legally what they need to do. However, they're going to need guidance. They're going to know, who do I need to ask to if I have questions about, whatever, let's assume I may have a medical condition that I don't want anyone to know right away. The things that you want to know, but you're not sure who to talk to. And
Yeah.
constantly, or the fact, like you said, the culture, like, for example, I used to work for a former business and they had terms for all their employees. They called them team members. They called guests. So like those are things that are so important operationally, right? And so you can weave in HR in that as well, because if you don't give a sense to a culture to a new employee, they're going to get the culture unfortunately, from maybe sometimes a disgruntled employee
Yeah.
or someone that, is on the cusp of leaving, may not care. And that's no one to blame because
Yeah.
you didn't give them a structure.
You
Sorry.
didn't give them that. Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, it's like if you have, I always use Jack and Jill, but if you have
It's
Jack
fine.
trained Jill, if you have Jack trained Jill, but Jack is having a bad day. Like, what if they forgot things? Like, so having an actual structure, new hire orientation, you're really going to go through everything and you want to be the first impression, right? You want to set the law of the land. You want to set that precedent. So you don't want someone else to tell your new employee what your company is. You want to do that. So I feel like, some companies, they focus so much on their customer and they don't focus on their employees. And you have to understand that your employees are a huge, one of your biggest assets. So if they aren't getting behind your brand, your culture, your mission, then the productivity may not be what you want it to be. So why not set the tone? So I think that is it. And then on the employer side, having like a time and attendance, like tracking, well, for the employees, but for the employers, they give it a time and attendance tracking, because again, a lot of employees just feel like, it's a burden, like, oh, why do you guys have to track my time? But just really showing them how to, having those just basic things like this, how you clock in, this how you don't clock in, you clock in for your break. So having those important trainings, I think it's very impactful and will save you money at the end.
I had a situation where, my former employee of mine didn't like to eat. They were like, oh, I don't get hungry. I come in at 8 and I don't eat it. I'm a late eater. And so we ended up basically scheduling the person for 6 hours and have them wait the lunch. And she would get frustrated because we would literally had her waive the lunch every single day.
Yeah.
And because even the managers were like, do we need them to? Yes, because every day they don't take lunch and they have to work only 6 hours. And guess what? Miraculously, they started taking their lunch breaks because they're losing out, because we're like, look, that was the solution, that we cannot let you work 8 hours without taking a meal break. If you are insisting on not taking a leave, we're not going to pay you overtime because it doesn't make any sense to us. So you can work 6 hours and waive your lunch and then go home. Guess what? They started working 8 hours, they took their lunch. And then again, it wasn't punitive. It was just like not making them understand, look, we don't want to be on the hook because you're not understanding. And I get you don't get hungry. But it's the law. The law says you need to take a lunch break before the 5th hour. And they were not understanding that. So
so I think that's why training for that is very impactful, because a lot of the employees just think like, we're just making you. It's like, no, just really think about the employer will love for you to just work, but the law says that you have to. And if they don't do it, then it can get in a lot of trouble. You can get a penalty for every day, every clock in, it can be very costly. So training and educating the employees on this is the reason why. And if you don't want to eat, that's fine. Go take a walk, get some vitamin D, go outside, do whatever, do something like that.
And that's surprising. It is very, very surprising to me still that many employers are not aware that there's a meal break penalty. That's a 1 hour up to maximum 2 hours maximum. If you don't give them the rest breaks and the meal breaks, they are entitled to 2 hours maximum penalty. And those penalties add up because it's based on the hourly rate. And guess what? That technically can be now calculated into overtime, and that can be now a non-compliant wage statement. And it suddenly snowballs into multiple violations. And guess what? An employer now is looking at, and they're like, wait a minute, just because I didn't get them a lunch or they didn't take it late.
They didn't take a 10-minute break.
California law is very unforgiving. It is a very technical violation. Definitely. And look, I've been on both sides. I do sometimes feel bad for business owners because business owners, especially small business owners, are trying to comply. It is people like you, consultants, that definitely can help them, guide them, because a lot of times it isn't. And look, I hate to say it, but I didn't know it's not a defense, which is why I think your services are so important, because you can educate them and hopefully get them out of this so they don't get themselves into further trouble.
Exactly. And I love your example of how it's like 1 hour and then it's 2 hours. But then if you do that every single day, and then if they were to file a lawsuit, then they come and they see that Jack comes in and Jack didn't comply. Now they're going to look at Jill, Jane. They're going to look at everybody. Yes. Then they're going to go back. I know of an example. Actually, it happened to me, and which was so weird when I was first starting off in HR. I started to work for a company within the first month, and they had a time and attendance lawsuit, and I got a check because the part of the penalty or what came out of it was that you actually have to back pay all the people who used to work here, and you have to pay your current people. I was only there for a month. I got a check in the mail for nothing, so it can really, develop and come to something so small can turn out to be so big. So we really try to paint those pictures and educate and let our clients know. And once we're done, they're like, oh, no, we're shutting everything down. Everybody takes their breaks. Everybody clocks out. Don't just get out. So they really start to understand it. And that's where we come in to really educate and let them know all of the penalties.